White text over video of past events. Logo, Cultural Access Collaborative. Professional Development Series presents. Co-creation with the disability community. At left, presentation slides. All content will be voiced. At right, stacked mini videos of presenting speaker and ASL interpreter. The speaker stands at a podium before a hybrid audience.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Zhen Heinemann, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Cultural Access Collaborative. I specifically deal with statewide engagement, but we're all part of the bigger team. I want to say hi to the steering committee folks who are in the room. Thank you for also being here. The Cultural Access Collaborative believes that arts and culture are for everyone, and it is our mission to empower Illinois as a whole's cultural spaces to become more accessible to people with disabilities. I apologize, I did not give you a visual description. I am a white person with some gray-black hair, wearing some tortoiseshell glasses and a crossbody bag and full black outfit. All right. So the 4 pillars of the Cultural Access Collaborative are professional development, like the event that you are at right now, accessible equipment loans, the access calendar, and our network. We have, if you're here in person, sorry Zoom room folks, but we've got stickers. If you want to pick them up, the QR code one takes you to our website where you could always find a link to our programs that get uploaded on YouTube. So if you've missed one, you can always go back if it is a recorded one and watch it. Otherwise, you can just shout out the Cultural Access Collaborative on your water bottle or notebook or other thing you carry around, so that whenever you need to remember who to reference, if folks are looking for accessible equipment loans or access calendar, you've got an easy reminder. All right, so our real-time captioning is provided by Efficiency Reporting, and if you want to get that on your device, you can feel free to scan the QR code that is currently on the screen. Go for it, and we've got them sitting over there. We also have ASL interpretation, which on the Zoom is able to be pinned. It's pinned for us by 5-star interpreting. Over here on my right, your audience left of the room. If you need to move closer to that for a better access situation, please do. Feel free to move about the room. And please chat with our hosts for tech and access support on the Zoom. We haven't done very many hybrid events, so I want to make sure that if you're in that Zoom room and you've got things to say, please do. We've got folks watching the chat to make sure that we can get connected with you, and we want to learn as we go, which is a big pillar of cultural accessibility. All right, without any more ado, I'm going to turn it over to our absolutely fantastic presenters, Bill Green and Allison Price from Lincoln Park Zoo, to talk about signs of inclusion and co-creating accessible interpretive signage. Welcome up, folks.
Zhen leaves the podium as Allison takes their place.
Thank you all for being here in person and virtually. My name is Allison Price. I'm the Senior Director of Learning and Guest Engagement here at the zoo. I'm a middle-aged woman in a black pullover sweatshirt with Lincoln Park Zoo's logo on the front and a yellow collar peeking in my neck with long hair and glasses. So I'm happy to welcome you all here today and learn from my colleague Bill, as well as our partner Dierdre, about a project that we've been working on for the last few years here at the zoo. So just a little bit of background, Lincoln Park Zoo has always strived to be a welcoming and inclusive place. But if I'm being sort of frank, some of that happened intentionally and some of it happened unintentionally, just as we think about exhibit design and people moving through this space. Excuse me. You still down? Sure, that's the story of my life. We've always been a welcoming space, and some of that has happened intentionally, and some of it has happened by accident as we just think about building a public space like a zoo or a museum. Recently, though, we started thinking about how could we very intentionally make our space, and specifically the storytelling at the zoo, more inclusive for all of our guests and for people with disabilities in particular. So these are some of the examples on the screen of some of the ways that we've done interactive and accessible elements at the zoo in the past. We've done smelling stations where you get to pretend to be a pollinator. We've done tactile signage. We've done sensory walls. All of that stuff has been great additives to the guest experience. So we really wanted to think with this project of how we could do it maybe in a novel way. Lincoln Park Zoo has had some really great success in 3 key areas of learning within the informal institutions of learning like zoos, aquariums, and museums. We have proven practices in community engagement, in interpretive planning and interpretation, so that is sort of like chats and exhibit signs and demonstrations that you would see on grounds. And we had growing expertise and leadership in accessibility and inclusion over the last few years. And so our thought was, what if we could bring these 3 domains together on one project? And that's what this project is all about. It's co-creating, based on our community engagement models, interpretive or exhibit features with people with disabilities in order to make the zoo more inclusive. So our goals were to not only create some new interpretive installations, but also to test whether that co-creation process could be validly applied to exhibit signage here on ground. So we were sort of evaluating both the things we created and the processes that we used. So our goals were to increase our overall visitor engagement in this space and to strengthen our efficacy in meeting our learning outcomes, right? So that's the part that's about what we're actually building and sharing with our guests, as well as enhancing the visitor experience for everyone. But we also wanted to specifically make sure that we are enhancing the visitor experience for people with disabilities who come to the zoo, and that the co-creation process will be mutually rewarding, not only for us as practitioners at the zoo, but the partners that we brought in to help create these things. So again, we're really trying to make sure that we learn as much as possible about what we should be putting on our grounds and the processes that we do to create that. So the team that worked on this project was made up of a lot of different folks here. We started with the interpretation core, and that's based on a model that we use that we'll describe a little bit later of how we build our interpretives here at the zoo. It's basically a group of select members of our learning department and our marketing and communications department. And those are the folks that have been working for the last several years on interpretive graphics throughout the zoo. But in order to do that correctly, we also bring in a lot of people around the zoo. Those would be our internal partners, which are usually made up of animal care and conservation experts. Sometimes we'll bring in external partners, and this is one of those cases where we brought in several individuals who identify as having a disability to be in the room with all of us, and then contracted staff. In this case, those were our fabricators who actually built the things that we designed. And then I'm going to hand this over to Bill, who's going to take it from here.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, folks, for showing up, too. Really appreciate it. Glad to be here because we love talking about this stuff. My name is Bill Green. I'm the Accessibility and Inclusion Manager here at Lincoln Park Zoo. I'm a middle-aged white man with dark hair and a salt and pepper beard with glasses. And Allison and I dressed alike today. I'm also wearing my Lincoln Park Zoo black quarter zip with a blue shirt, collared shirt poking from underneath. Again, thank you for being here. So this project, one of the things that I love about this project and that kind of set it apart was the idea of thinking about accessibility from the beginning. Not as an afterthought, not as something midway through, not as something to retrofit, but from the beginning. It makes a true difference when you really think about accessibility from the beginning, not just in the process that you're doing, but in those final results that you have. One of the things we were thinking about was the principles of universal design, identifying barriers that are typically found in interpretive, whether that's the signage, tactiles, whatever that type of interpretation that might be. And then thinking about the variation in which ways people approach, interact, and exit. And that is something that I think becomes a theme throughout the interpretive information we heard from people, the plan, the process, thinking about that approach, interaction, and exit. We were also thinking about the disability justice and the idea of nothing for us without us. We wanted to center disability voices, and so it was really important to us to have those lived experiences, both from our zoo staff, our external partners that Allison mentioned we work with from the disability community, and creating meaningful partnerships, not just having that kind of like, this is the token or the lip service of that, but actually giving meaningful participation. I'm really excited towards the end of our presentation. One of our partners is here, and I think can share with that we really did achieve a very meaningful partnership that rewarded kind of all sides, all those groups Allison mentioned, I think learned a lot and had a great relationship with each other. I just want to shout out some of the key partnerships we had with Heinz Veterans Association, Friedman Place, Chicago Hearing Society, and Envision Unlimited. These are some groups that showed up that brought a lot of people to participate and provide feedback in this. Arrows. One of the first steps in this program was doing input sessions. And this is one of the things from the presentation, if this interests you, if you think that co-creation is something that you want your institution to participate in, this is one of the things I think is kind of a paramount and one of the takeaways that is easy to replicate and that should be replicated by other organizations. We created 25 hours of input sessions with 74 different participants. Those were broken up into disability that they primarily identified with. We had some people who actually identified with multiple disabilities and attended more than one of these sessions, but it was 74 unique participants. We had blind and low vision participants, folks from the deaf and hard of hearing community, folks who identify as neurodivergent, and people who identify with mobility disabilities. And we asked them very specific, pointed questions about interpretation. But what was great is we also left space and a lot of room for those tangents and that information we learned. Without prompting, every group brought up wayfinding and bathrooms, and that was really fascinating and such valuable information we heard. The point of these input sessions was to create and collect information around interpretation, but what we found was we had a wealth of other information that we were able to create two separate reports from. One informed our interpretation, and that report is now directly reflected in the zoo's interpretive plan. The other one was created in a second report that's influenced the way we do guest service, guest experience, infrastructure, et cetera. We've been able to see that information. So having both of those documents that have direct information, quotes, and preferences from people identifying as disabilities, lots of examples of things that they think are positive, lots of examples of things that they have experienced in places that were negative. It's really been beneficial and tremendous amount of learning for us. I'd highly recommend that. This slide is just to be a lot of fun of like, so what did we learn in those sessions and what do we do with that information? The slide is a Venn diagram of those communities I talked about, the deaf and hard of hearing, people who are blind and low in vision, people with mobility disabilities, and people who identify as neurodivergent. And we decided to find what was overlapping with 2, 3, or all 4 communities, what was unique to those communities, and what was being said about things that people thought were supportive, beneficial to them. So just seeing things like a lot of people brought up lighting, for example, and how lighting can be used in place. A lot of people brought up tactile use of things in interpretation. A lot of people brought up plain language in information. So we saw a lot of those things that we knew were going to benefit and help everybody. I love the visual of this. It's the Venn diagram has a lot of digital Post-it notes that each of those Post-it notes represents a unique idea that we heard. And so we even had to combine some ideas, right? So each Post-it note is a unique bit of feedback and information that we received that we were like, this is something we want to act on. After creating all those focus groups, which again, I really enjoyed. I think I was the only person who was at every focus group. Again, can't recommend enough. We did, in the summer, we did a share app program where we brought a bunch of people to the zoo and we went and visited what, from data we've collected from guests, are kind of identifies our most popular animals. So seals, bears, giraffes, gorillas, rhinos, things like that. And we went with people around, we talked about interpretive information and what the messages are these areas have. So it's a care message, a conservation message, et cetera. And we talked about with guests what that is with the idea of what do you want to build? What are the stories? What's the information that you think is interesting to you? What do you want an audience with disabilities to learn? What do you think gives the most kind of already ideas and information that would be most relevant to creating accessible experiences and experiences that have a multi ways of interacting and multi-sensory to it. And what we took from people were, I'm not to that. It goes to Allison, how we figured it out from there. So I'll pass it off to her. Let me zoom this over you.
think I'm only up here briefly anyway. So this is the process that I was alluding to earlier. This is our interpretive task force process. We actually have recently renamed it to our interpretive signage team, which more accurately represents what the purpose of this group is about. But this group has been in existence. It's an interdepartmental team at the zoo that has been in existence since around 2017 or so. And it includes representatives not only from those two departments I mentioned earlier, so from learning and marketing and communications, who are chiefly responsible for interpretive signage, but it involves representatives from conservation science, from horticulture, animal care, guest services, forgetting public relations, maybe one more that I forgot, but basically interdepartmental throughout the zoo to make sure that the interpretive signage, and again, when we say interpretive in this case, we mean storytelling at the zoo about our animals and plants, that all of that signage represents the stories and the modalities that we all kind of can get behind and we agree on. This is the process that that group uses regularly, and this is the process that this project also utilized. So we start with theme development. So basically thinking about what is the big idea or the so what that we want people to walk away from, either from this single sign or from this exhibit, right? What's the reason this exhibit exists from an educational perspective, right? Once we have that interpretive theme, then we go into the copy and content phase where we're literally writing the sentences that will appear on the sign. All of those bits of verbiage get approved by our content experts and by everybody in the project team. Then we go into the design phase where we actually put it to a visual representation. This is what we're actually going to make it look like. These are the colors. These are the illustrations that are going to accompany the text. And that gets approved. Once everybody approves that process, it goes through fabrication, it actually gets built, and then it finally gets installed. So that's how interpretive sign making happens here at Lincoln Park Zoo regularly. That's how these signs were worked on as well, which really meant that that co-creation process took several weeks and several months because we were doing this collaboratively on multiple Zooms with lots of buy-in from lots of individuals. And that's another thing when we think about replicability that we really had to account for is making sure that there was room in the timeline for everybody to weigh in on concept and then also verify that that concept came to fruition in the approval process. Back to you, Bill.
Great, because I left you on such a cliffhanger. So what animals were chosen? We had gorillas, seals, and giraffes, some of our most popular animals. And we also came across themes. One step back though. So we had our charrette in the summer and we invited people who had been focus group participants to come and join. From that pool, people then applied if they wanted to be long-term partners working on these projects. Those long-term partners were all paid partnerships also. That was a much more, in the charrette and the focus groups, that was maybe a 1 to 2 hour commitment people were making, but we knew we had a much longer, several months of commitment so those were paid time and people spent a lot of time with zoo staff working on that. So with gorillas, and the themes we came to is gorillas, we are constantly engaged in the process of providing for gorillas' well-being. Was after learning about gorillas, and this meant talking with even some of our staff and our researchers here who work in our Fisher Center that studies African apes, we came across this as kind of the most relevant thing. Then our seals, we talked about seals being extraordinary animals receive extraordinary care. And so that signage is all about how we care for seals. We have more information about that. And then with giraffes, which is this is the order the signs were developed into. We didn't do them simultaneously. We kind of did them one at a time. I feel like as we went, the process grew and changed and we got better every time. Giraffes are the best known animals we don't know enough about. So let me go to our, there was a slide. I was expecting us to have a slide there. All right, so when we had our long-term partners and we had our zoo staff members, both our core team, those partners that we talked about who were maybe coming from animal care, other areas, we even had some of our folks who do research out in the field. Our folks working on giraffes actually are out in Tanzania with those populations. So we had a lot of conversations. It was a lot of, I feel like the partners were able to get a real deep dive into how we do things at the zoo, how we ideate ideas, how we brainstorm, how we develop things. So on this slide, there's several things. We're trying to show an example of how we collaborated. And it begins at the very top with thinking about, we do cognition puzzles with our gorillas. And one of those cognition puzzles works on food preference. And so that was a popular idea. We knew we wanted that some way to be shown in the signage, in the final interpretive signage. Now, those cognition puzzles that we do with the gorillas and the food preference work that we do with them, that's all done on a touch screen. But what we saw is food preferences, and I'm going to kind of summarize some of the quotes here. But the idea of going analog made a lot more sense. Rather than having a touch screen and thinking about the barriers, it was something we heard from people over and over again was, when technology doesn't work, it becomes such a barrier. So we wanted to make sure that we had things that could not break down easily. We had things that could be rugged. If you're at a cultural institution, you know how you have to build things to hold up to what you would never imagine people could do, right? So we wanted to think about how we could build that thing. So analog made a lot of sense. And we talked about how food preferences, where that I have one of our speech from our internal partners here that food preferences is maybe not the most exciting, but we kept returning to that. And how even one of our external partners talking about in teaching how food became so relatable. So this idea of food and the process with our gorillas became such a clear thing and such a relatable to do. The next picture, so the first picture is a very, very rough early sketch of what this might look like on a gorilla-shaped sign. And then the second picture in this is what we actually prototyped. So it's a sign that has we made a cucumber slice and a grape slice, and you would flip up a card, and underneath you would talk about what is your preference. And whichever preference you chose, it would then give you information about why gorillas choose that. Cucumber is one thing they choose, but a grape is that more preferred. It's that kind of sweet treat for a gorilla. Our prototypes started off looking like the greatest science fair project you've ever seen. And then we upgraded to getting some professionals to make them outside, but they were so much fun to build and to make. And it's really amazing when you see the hidden talent of the people you work with who can really punch out some amazing prototypes. And so what we ended with was, on my picture at the bottom right hand of the screen, is the final sign that we're going to get to in more depth. But in the middle there, kind of at the gorilla's belly, is two kind of weighted barrels where you have that cucumber and that grape, that analog, that food preference where people get to pick their food choice and kind of have that same interaction as a food preference puzzle as our gorillas do. So that was kind of our deep dive into just one of the things that we spent a long time to figure out. Pass it off to Allison.
So when Bill says we built the prototypes, he's right. We literally went to the craft store and got some materials and went to our auditorium with hot glue and puff paint and cardboard and built some prototypes, which had some challenges that we'll go through. But this is what that little arts and crafts time looked like. So that is our colleague Amanda literally free drawing the outline of a gorilla. So yes, can we give props, please? We had other elements on that sign that we wanted to have like kind of flip, like side A, side B panels that you could flip. So there in the bottom left corner is Ben drawing a gorilla eyeball where the gorilla is going to look relaxed and another one where he's going to look concerned. And then I filled that in with hot glue to make it textural and three-dimensional. It was a weird day at the zoo, but it was really fun. After that, we realized we had some challenges, and so we built panels that were actually printed at a print shop, and we attached them to some Dierdre fencing, some graded fencing to mimic the height that we would initially install on them. So, when we're talking about this iterative process, our prototyping processes got better, and the questions that we asked, how we asked of the zoo got better. And Bill had mentioned that some of the things that we learned in those initial input sessions are now in our interpretive plan. Also, sort of how and when we choose to prototype signs is also in there. So now we know sort of like, are we going to prototype one single species ID sign? Are we going to prototype that with the public? No. But if we do an entire exhibit refresh, are we going to prototype that? Yes, because we found this process so valuable. So just been a great learning experience for us. This is actually the prototyping process that happened. This is one part of the project that Lincoln Park Zoo did the majority of the work, but we did invite any of the partners who had flexibility in their days or had interest in the prototyping to come and join us. And so that was a great opportunity for all of us to learn alongside each other, because that was a moment that our evaluators were taking the lead and the rest of us were sort of like all the helpers. And we would just be out on grounds and just say, hey, to the normal passerby, would you like to come and help us? We're redesigning some signs. You want to give us some feedback? And they would look at the signs and fiddle with them and then tell us what they thought. And we did surveys and kind of interviewed surveys as well as observations. So we got tons of data on each of our signs before we actually made our final designs and our final constructed elements, which made a huge difference to us. This is one of the best stories of how to prototype correctly that we learned. It's just a really fun little anecdote to share. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about with our seals, because the seal theme was all about taking care of the animals, and so we actually put a bucket in the middle of the sign. This is our prototype version. It's literally a sand pail that we had our facilities team cut in half, and we filled it with plastic fishing lures that look like fish and squid. And the content underneath that talks about how our seals get a variety of fish as part of their vet-approved diet. Almost everybody that came up to the prototype sign did not read that paragraph and were like, oh, look at all the plastic that wild seals ingest every day. And we thought, well, that's not what we were going. Thank you for being concerned, but that's not what we were going for. And so it really allowed us to figure out how realistic we needed to make the bucket, how we needed to change it so it didn't look like something that you were just collecting in a beach cleanup, and where to put the interpretive text so that maybe we could curtail some of that misunderstanding. And so then you can see that final design has the real fish outside pulled out, and the main text is larger and brought up higher so that you see it more contextualized with that bucket. And the bucket is inset into the sign, but it is still the three-dimensional resin. You can actually feel it next time you're at the zoo. Very fun. And so that really changed how we designed the sign to make sure we didn't have miscommunication. Bill, you want to walk through the final designs? Yeah.
So in creating the final designs, we went with the seal, the gorilla being shaped like the animals, with the idea of thinking about that experience, especially for our guests who are blind and low vision, to have the experience of knowing the size. So these signs are actually to the size of the animal, and that. With a giraffe, you can't do that. A giraffe is 18 feet tall, so you don't really have that. So we have what's kind of a series of square panels for our giraffe. There is a bus that is used as a reference for a giraffe size next to a model of a giraffe. That bus is a metal bus. That gets touched by everybody. It's so interesting. Everybody loves touching the bus and doing that. So we created the same example, the same tactile experience with that, but we did it with a scale instead of with like a smaller scale than doing it on the one-to-one that the seal and the gorilla have. The seal has a great information about care. That bucket that Allison mentioned was also something. There's a square of Jell-O that's a great texture that gets lots of touch interaction. There's also an element where you can brush the seal's teeth. That's a lower element because we think a lot of kids are into it, and we're exactly right. A ton of kids come up, they immediately know they're supposed to brush the seal's teeth, which is duplicating what our zookeepers do here at the zoo. And then our gorilla is set up. What's interesting about the placement of our gorilla is something we learned from so much people was thinking about how you interact with something like this. If the idea is to stop and take time and interact with it, that you are putting it in a place where it is not overlapping with heavy traffic, where you're not worried about other guests interfering with that, where you're moving through you're able to interact with that sign without thinking that you're blocking a path or being in somebody's way or being rushed. So our gorilla sign is actually kind of off to the side, and it allows for that really slowed down, take your time, autonomous visit that we wanted. Like I said, the same thing with our giraffe. It's outside near where the giraffe's outdoor area is, but it's kind of off to the side. So what we ended up with, I think, doesn't exactly look like anything else we have at the zoo, which is really fun too, because this level of interaction, this variety where you have this much tactile, this much side, these many things that are kind of simple moving. We have on the giraffe sign, we have a map that shows both rainy and dry seasons, and all of that is tactile. You completely feel all of that. We have a matching with giraffe patterns on their hide, and same thing with that, completely tactile to travel through that. So we have a lot of different ways to interact with that. What I want to get to, though, is one of my favorite things that we heard from people kept coming up over and over again, was about a behind the scenes experience. But we also heard a lot of people talk about autonomy when using when interacting with something, and autonomy when using technology and wanting to use their own technology. So what we've created on here is a QR code that allows people to have access to some kind of behind the scenes videos that were created. There is so it's for the seals, it's a behind the scenes about the care for our seals. That video is available with open captions. There's an ASL version that the ASL is done by a certified deaf interpreter. And the audio description, there's also an audio description version of that video. All three of those videos are on this landing page when you do the QR code. What's also on this page is a reproduction of all the text that is found on the signs. The reason that's there is it allows you on your own device to change the contrast, to change the size of the text, to take it away and read it when you want to later, so that you retain that, you have that information to take away if you don't want to read it right then. There's also an option for all those blocks of text where that you can hit an audio version and a zoo staff member is actually recorded reading you the sign. So you have all these different ways to interact with this information, and it's completely autonomous for you on your device in a way that so it's kind of giving you the environment you're comfortable with, and it's also letting you learn in the mode and the environment in which you are most comfortable, so we know we're approaching people kind of at their best place to learn. So repetition of text, change in text size on the phone I mentioned. We just always think about the variation. I tell people all the time, expect variation. That's what we're thinking about. I feel like that this interaction with the QR code is a great example of how to expect variation in what we're doing and learning. All right. Is this you? Okay.
So we wanted to find out if this process worked and if the signs worked. I won't go into a lot of the details about the signage because that's for a different conversation. We can nerd out together about font sizes and placements and color schemes all you want. So find me later if you want. But we did learn a lot about the products that we created, but we were really curious to know about the process, right? And so you're going to hear a little bit from Dierdre about that. But this is some of the findings as it related to the inclusion of outside partners into this very internal process that we had honed over years. Like, oh, is this going to be meaningful for people? Are they going to feel part of it? We really wanted this to be a quality experience for everybody, but particularly for our partners. And so we did a lot of evaluation to just make sure that was happening. And we did it throughout the process so that if we were going off the rails, we could get things back on track, which was really, I think, helpful for us as practitioners. So we were asking of ourselves and our partners, kind of how did our partners' ideas contribute to these signs that we created? And did both zoo personnel and these partners benefit mutually from the co-creation process? In order to collect this data, we had partner journals. So we had prompt questions that we had to fill out and turn into our evaluation staff. And then our evaluation staff were present at every meeting that we had, taking the notes and then sort of like deciding what our conversations truly meant, right? And really interpreting what was going on in the room so that they could sort of recap the process for us. And that's a real luxury too. Not a lot of cultural institutions have embedded evaluators or have a project that has that many evaluation hours built into it. So we were just really fortunate to be able to have that with this grant. It's not something that you get all the time, so we wanted to make the most of it. Fortunately, it was a positive experience for us and for our partners. Half of the staff rated the experience as excellent, and a third rated it as good. We had 9% rating it as superior. But when you ask the partners, 50% said superior and 36% said excellent and 7% said good. I love that because I think we were trying so hard to make sure it was good for everybody. I think we were really hard critics on ourselves. So I'm loving that the partners felt it was so beneficial because I think we always found like, oh, we can do this better, or I hope it's meaningful for everybody. So to see that that was the case was really positive for us. And then when we looked at our successes and challenges from the co-creation process, overwhelmingly, people noted collaboration and teamwork, and then that back and forth design process. We did iterative designs. I think that giraffe sign had like 8 versions by the time we got to the final. I mean, it was like, let's tweak this here, let's tweak this here. I mean, it was a lot of back and forth work that we were doing. And so the fact that intensive conversation over Zoom and the back and forth design was called out as a success was great, because that's where a lot of our time really got spent. And then when we look at the challenges, most of the challenges that were noted were timing and scheduling and missed deadlines. And that was just because we were against other competing priorities within zoo processes, sometimes within the learning department, sometimes zoo-wide. It was really just sort of that like inside baseball stuff. There really weren't a lot of concerns about the team dynamic, which again was really enjoyable for us. So you can hear actually more about that from Dierdre.
Allison leaves the podium as Dierdre takes her place.
All right, thank you. So my name is Dierdre Keane, and I am one of the partners that had the unique opportunity to collaborate on this project. And I am a middle-aged white woman with dark brown hair and a ponytail with yellow highlights. And I swear there was no memo going around that we all had to wear black. So I am wearing a black shirt and jeans. A little about me. You can hear me, right? Okay. A little about me. I am the librarian and technology teacher at Chicago Public Schools, and I have been teaching for 23 years. I have sensory and neural hearing loss in both ears and wear cochlear implants to help me to hear. I have been president of a nonprofit organization, HLAA, which stands for Hearing Loss Association of America. They are the national organization that helps people with hearing loss. My nonprofit organization is called HLAA Chicago Lincoln Park, and we help others advocate for themselves to better their lives living with hearing loss. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience. And I just wanted to say this is the coolest room to speak in because you see the lions out there. So this is really cool. What was my experience? So I just wanted to say it was kind of daunting at first. I'm a teacher, so I teach kindergarten all the way to 8th grade. So most of my day is spent talking to little kids. We rarely get the opportunity to speak with adults. So this was a unique opportunity to collaborate and speak with adults on this project. So meeting different people and learning everyone's roles was a bit overwhelming, and learning how to work with the group took patience. But it was also exciting because when does one get the chance to go behind the scenes here at Lincoln Park Zoo? I worked on the gorilla exhibit and the giraffe exhibit, and I thought I knew about these animals, but apparently I didn't know anything until I got here, and seeing the animals up close and learning more about them was just amazing. And so the people here who take care of the animals, I just didn't realize how much they do. So they do a great job. So I love participating in this project. And also as a teacher, I was able to bring back what I learned to my students who love learning about animals. So it was awesome. Real production, it was so cool to share ideas and listen to ideas from others and to work together toward a common goal. To see that come to life is truly a phenomenal experience. And what I mean by that is, listening to each other's ideas and that we had to compromise, even though sometimes my ideas might not have made it. It was just unreal to see like a drawing, and then everybody made it come to life. So when I got to come here and see the final sign, it was just like, wow, it was amazing. So you don't really get that many opportunities to see things come to life. And finally, the zoo staff. I have gained a new appreciation for the Lincoln Park Zoo staff. They are the most knowledgeable people I know. Their knowledge helped make this project possible. So if you have not seen the signs, I recommend that you see them. The giraffe sign is incredible, you know, just to see the different panels, and the gorilla sign too. And I, to this day, tell people about the signs, and I think that more cultural institutions should follow their example and make their signs accessible as well. So I think that was it, right? Oh, I have more. Okay, so what was something that surprised me? All the facts that I did not know about the gorillas and giraffes. When we had the annual meeting, it was so amazing to see all the people that support the zoo. So I'm a member here, so that's really cool, and I'm excited because those people inspired me. What do I hope the zoo learned about designing for accessibility? The different ways accessibility can be provided, and I know Bill alluded to it already. The closed captioning, the open caption, sign language, tactile, touch, low signs, and audio option. To have all the options available and to realize accessibility is for everyone. So I offer my experiences as someone with hearing loss, but it was great to learn about from other people what they need too as well. So I found that experience very informative, and I appreciate that we have our ASL interpreters here and our captioner here as well. So I appreciate that. What else would I like to share about my experience? I love the prototype stage, and Allison talked about that. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have known how to make it better, how to make the sign better. And it was just so cool to see adults and children and what their experience was like in interacting with the signs. Yes, like I said, observing visitors, they helped us give the most knowledge of designing a more accessible and knowledgeable design. And again, finally, networking and meeting amazing people like Bill and Allison and having the opportunity to better the community. Thank you for this amazing opportunity, and to Lincoln Park Zoo on creating a beautiful, accessible zoo. Thank you.
Next slide, emails. aprice@lpzoo.org and bgreen@lpzoo.org.
Dierdre is sprinting to the end of the school year, so I think we got to give it up to her again for that. We love our teachers at Lincoln Park Zoo. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Dierdre. We thoroughly enjoyed partnership with Dierdre and everybody that we worked with. It was really an amazing group of partners. And Dierdre just reminds me that I think what's so fun about these signs, and now that they've been up, they're around the zoo at our gorilla habitat, our seal habitat, and our giraffe habitat. If you're here in person, the zoo's open till 5. You have time to go visit them. But you can also come every day. We're a free zoo, remember. But seeing that, we see interaction with people from all ages, and that was something we heard from people, is like they didn't want this to feel like something that was just made for little kids or something, but it really can be. There's really something for a huge range of ages, and we're proud of that. I'm always proud when people of such a wide range take advantage of all our accessibility here at the zoo. I think it's also worth mentioning, again, Allison mentioned some, but so many people worked on this project. There were really dozens of people, when you add in everybody who worked on this, who were there from the very beginning and throughout the entire thing. We collected people along the way. We lost people along the way. But along the way, we had tons of people, and it really took every single one of us to create this at the end. It was also made possible because of an Institution Museum and Library Services grant. That's about 5 years ago, I think that grant was being submitted or was accepted maybe about. That's how long we've been working on this project. It kind of feels like we're just now kind of at the getting up the end where we've wrapped that up. Our final report wasn't that long ago. So a lot of people, a lot of time, but well worth it. And we really enjoyed it along the way. If anyone in the room has a question, I can also say check out on the Zoom if there's any questions, but I'd be happy to answer anything at this time. Yeah, you can we'll turn the room mics on so people on the Zoom can hear us, but if there's any questions in here.
Bill, one in the back.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm curious about how you put together the teams, like for the focus group and for the community partners. Like, were you guys reaching out to different organizations, or did you like put out a call and people came to you?
We did. We worked with organizations. Oh, I don't know if the mics. You don't think the mic's picked up? Okay. The question was when we were doing the input sessions at the beginning, how were we able to recruit people? And we did. We went with groups. We also put out a call to Zoom members. I think that's actually how we got Dierdre, was by working with Zoom members. And then with some partner organizations that we had, I had thrown out a few there. Like we did a great group with Heinz VA. I had a group of veterans who I did like a one-off special session with a group of veterans over Zoom, and that was really great. I had a couple other organizations like that. One that wasn't mentioned, but like the Epilepsy Foundation, we worked with them and we had a one-off session with folks from them. That was a tremendous amount of information we learned thinking about potential seizure triggers with lighting, with colors, with things like that. So that was a group that we learned a tremendous from. So it was a mix of working with organizations, reaching out to our existing networks like members and other things, and just kind of putting out a wide net of people. And we had, again, it was people from really, it was 18 and over, but it was like all ages in that group, a wide range of disabilities. And it's still people from those input sessions that were about 4.5 years ago are still people that have relationship with the zoo and are still always involved in what we're doing and we see and things. So it was a great relationship. You have something you want to add to that?
No, I think we did a little bit of snowballing too. Like at the end of our info sessions, we said, we've got more coming up. Tell anybody else we don't know that, so we were able to get a little bit of word of mouth that way too. But yeah, one thing I know that Bill mentioned also that we compensated the partners, which was really important for us to do. We also, at the end of it, gave everybody complimentary memberships because we just wanted everybody to be able to come back and see the signs. And so that's something that we learned from our colleagues in teen programs who have done that for our teen interns in the past. So we were happy to do that in this case too.
Is there another question in the back?
I have a question. Were you able to do a post occupancy evaluation or like an actual observation, like a structured observation on how people with different abilities actually interacted with the signage?
We do have our summative evaluations. So sort of now that they're installed, how are people using it? So we have been able to compare our prototype audience reaction to our final audience reaction. We did not segment it in terms of like different disability identities, partly because some of it was just observation. And so, we can't draw those conclusions. So we have it in like an aggregate. We are still editing that report. In general, it's really interesting if I'm trying to see the pages in my head. In general, we saw knowledge gains either increase a little bit or in the case, I think of the seal, increase exponentially from the prototype phase to the final phase, which demonstrated to us that we did make some really good changes in that prototype. And I think the one thing that was really interesting is we saw time at the signs decrease, but we all agreed that was because when we were doing the prototype, we were like, can you please read this sign? And so people were like, I better read the whole thing so I can give them feedback. And people are much more fluid in their visitation in real time. But yeah, we really did see kind of like learning gains from that first one to that second one. We just don't have it broken down.
Yeah, we've got some chat. Oh, we've got some questions from the chat. Would you like me to relay them?
Yeah, I can repeat it on the mic.
Fabulous.
Questions from the chat as well.
So first, during the initial interview process you took to identify areas of work, how many participants did you include, and what did you do to try to get a balanced range of demographics?
So the question was about in the input sessions. We ended up with 74 unique participants. Some folks were in multiple focus groups or input sessions, decided to come to more. And we, I think, so we broke it into people who identify as neurodivergent, people who are blind or have low vision, people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and people with mobility disabilities. And we had a pretty good representation across, I think one of the ways we just did that was by offering lots and lots of sessions for every group was one of the things that we did. So there was a real wide variety of times that people could approach. I think that was one of the things that we did. But yeah, again, it was kind of related to the first question, using our existing networks and working with organizations. And then also once we got some people involved, using word of mouth to connect with them.
And they weren't numerically, it's not like we had 7 people who in this, group, 8 people in this group. We couldn't balance it numerically. We just tried to make sure we sort of had critical mass and like we had enough feedback. Like it was sort of like a gut reaction. Like, do we think we have enough to go on? And Bill showed the Venn diagram. When we decided what to build, we focused on that inside of the Venn diagram that hit all of our audiences. So that was another way we tried to make sure that what we built would be as universal as possible.
I think in those input sessions, we started seeing a lot of repeated comments, which was also really positive to see people sharing some of the same experiences, same questions, same positives, same negatives coming up. So they also just became, we had enough people to have some redundancies and some affirmation of what we were.
Can I riff for 1 second too? Because I don't think we mentioned this. Bill and I could talk about this project for like weeks. You guys could just sleep over here and we'll just keep talking
It
about
was
it.
only 5 years of our lives.
But that input session process took 6 or 7 months. So just so everybody understands how much work went into things before we even decided which species to build about and what to build. Like it was 6 months of just collecting the data and talking about the data before we even brought people to the zoo. Like we started the input sessions in November of 2021, and we didn't bring people to that tour of the zoo where we talked about all the like, oh, which exhibit should we choose? That was July. So just to get an idea of how much time that actually really does take to collect all of those people together and to think about what you actually heard, it's an investment.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good point. It was work. We got some
Totally,
information.
yeah.
Another question from the chat. I'm curious to know how low or no vision users find the QR codes to use with their own devices. Are they tactile or is there some direction provided to make it easier to find?
They are tactile. They are textured and they have kind of integrated bump dots on each corner. Shout out to Clover Nook for developing those. Yes, so they are a tactile. And there's multiple QR codes on a sign. All those QR codes take you to the same location. Yeah, but that's I'm glad somebody asked. That's a good thing to mention. Yeah, they're really neat. Cloverfield makes excellent, or Clover Nook makes excellent tactile QR codes.
Another question, can you share the names of any grants or funding sources involved in supporting this project?
It was all institutional museum and library services. Then I guess there was some of the zoo did have to match. Some of that was grants or donors, but it was possible because of the IMLS grant.
And our final question from the chat, you already started speaking on this a little, but if you could talk through the duration of each step of the project to get a sense of that scope.
Want to take that?
We also mentioned all the number of giraffe sign designs that I think we had 5 Gantt charts, and then we finally just gave up writing new Gantt charts. So a Gantt chart, if you're not familiar, is like a visual representation of your project timeline. And we edited it so many times, I think we just stopped. We're like, we'll finish when we finish because this is the first of the process that we did. And so we were literally learning along the way about how long each phase was going to take. So it was kind of funny. We were making it up. So I would say I could look back at the notes so folks can email me if you want the real answer here. So the first phase, the discovery phase, so that those input sessions was, like I said, about 8 months, I think, in reality. And then each of the signs was about 6 months of concept development, design iteration, and prototype fabrication. That is fluid. Like I want to put an asterisk there because sometimes that was over a holiday. So we would take weeks off because people were out with their kids or things like that. Sometimes we would have to take a pause because like we didn't have critical mass of people, so there'd be breaks between the times. I think we were meeting weekly most of the time at the beginning, and then we'd kind of go to like a biweekly towards the end. So it was 6 months, but the potency of the meetings in those 6 months would kind of ebb and flow. And then some of these signs were sent out after the prototype was created. I think we took a couple months to look at the data, assess the data, and another couple months to make our final design. And then things went out for fabrication. Again, though, sometimes that fabrication had a break between it because for our first 2 signs, for the gorilla and the seal, we actually sent those to the fabricator at the same time for just internal logistical reasons. So the gorilla sign was like designed and like in our files for like a year before it went in the ground, just because of weird internal stuff. But I would say, realistically, if we were doing this now after learning the process, I think we would have given ourselves 6 to 8 months for a sign. And then, yeah, it was another 6 or 8 months for discovery. And then the back end to collect all of the data summatively, so all of the data after every sign went in, that was basically just as long as it took to get the correct number of observations that our evaluation team needed. So
I think we have time. You want to come up again?
All questions?
Great.
Oh,
Thank you.
more.
Do we have time?
Do one? Want to rock, paper, scissors?
Quick one.
Just real quick, given how successful this was, but also how much of an investment it was, is there a plan to do this for more exhibits in the future, or can we extend this further? Is there another grant in the works, or what's the plan?
To do more. Knew someone was going to ask that. In part, sort of, yes. So it's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. It's a complicated answer. So some of the things that we learned from the grant have been codified into the plan. So for example, I don't think we have the ability right now to take every sign and make a recording of the text on that sign. There's thousands of signs on the grounds. But for new signage, that's something that we will explore. And certainly sort of like thinking about, are we going to use ASL, captions, audio described video whenever we have video in the habitats? We've sort of like made a plan for like, this is our bare minimum, this is our ideal, this is how it would function. So we've done some of that stuff that we can iterate right now. I talked a little bit about the prototyping. I think eventually we would like to look at kind of like plussing up some of the accessibility of the signage that already exists. There is a limitation for budget and time, but never say never. We will see. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, it was perfect.
Great, yeah. So.
All right, this is Zhen. I'm back up here, everybody, to say goodbye to you. Oh, thanks, Bill. Bill's doing some tech so we could see.
No, somehow
slides. That's okay.
really messed it
We're
up.
good.
Okay.
Don't worry. Everybody, thank you all for being here with us today, either in person or online on our Zoom. I'm going to head back just to our resources page. This is our CAC newsletter QR code, as well as our survey about how you liked this experience, didn't like this experience. There's some tips or tricks or other things that you want to share with us. Please feel free to scan both of those and do that. The newsletter is awesome. You'll find out more about our upcoming professional development programs, as well as information about when we're looking for more steering committee members or when we're looking for new co-chairs or all of those kind of things, as well as other information about great accessibility law, things that you can participate by writing to lawmakers or grants or things like that we share often in our newsletter survey. And then lastly, again, if you did donate to us today, thank you so much. Anything counts because then we get to show that in our reports at the end of the year as a nonprofit, right? It's always great to show that people are enjoying it enough to financially participate. And the QR code is again on your screen or in the lower corner. So glad to have you here. This is the last program before we go on our summer break. So we will be back with programming in the fall. So while we're on summer break, please have a great time on your cultural accessibility journey and stay in touch. And then we'll see you back with professional development in the fall. You can always email us and all of those kind of things. All right, everybody, we are adjourned.
Credits appear. Co-creation with the disability community, presented by Cultural Access Collaborative. For workshop resources and more information, Visit culturalaccesscollab.org. Presenting speakers: Zhen Heinemann, CAC, moderator; Allison Price, Senior Director of Learning and Guest Engagement, Lincoln Park Zoo; Bill Green, Hart Prins Fund Accessibility and Inclusion Manager, Lincoln Park Zoo; Dierdre Keane, Librarian and Tech Teacher, Chicago Public Schools. Workshop Accessibility: Real-time captioning by Efficiency Reporting; ASL interpretation by 5-Star Interpreting; Video editing, captioning, and audio description by BridgetMelton.com.